in the name and by the power of the individual, beloved, mighty I Am presence of each son and daughter of God assembled here and assembled consciously across the face of America and the world. We salute the magnificent presence of our own beloved Son Kumara and the seven holy Kumaras, our beloved Alpha and Omega, of the Nameless One, of beloved Helios and Vesta, Lord Krishna and Sophia, of the great Manus of the root races, our own Lord Himalaya, beloved Vevasvata, the God and Goddess Meru, the magnificent and illustrious great divine director, the seven mighty Elohim, beloved mighty Hercules and Amazonia, and all of the mighty Elohim, the seven beloved Chohans of the rays, beloved El Moria and all the Chohans of the rays, the seven beloved archangels and their archei, Archangel Michael in faith and all of the archangels. We salute our own beloved Lord Mahachohan, the world teachers Jesus and Kuthumi, the cosmic Christ, beloved Lord Maitreya, and our blessed Lord of the world, beloved Lord Gautama. We salute the Mother of the world, beloved Mother Mary, the Mother of wisdom, beloved Sophia, and all of the blessed mothers of heaven who champion the cause of each one's Christhood and divinity. We ask now for the power of the divine mind to pour forth and to imprint the blueprint of the perfect pattern of the divine individual God identity, born from the very heart of God at that cosmic moment in the beginning. May it blaze forth now through the diamond heart of Moria and Mother Mary, and of the great Manus of the root races, and of beloved Immaculata, and exert its constant pressure upon the pliable consciousness of the children of God and the sons and daughters of God in embodiment. May that image of the firstborn become the pearl of great price, which each one devotes every ounce of their life's substance to accomplish. This which we have called forth for the conscious disciples of the ascended masters, wherever they might be across the face of the earth, we also call that this call shall be taken up, amplified, and multiplied, so as to include the millions and billions of life waves of threefold flames assigned to this planetary body, that they might return to that immaculate vision held in the mind of God for them each one. We thank thee, and to this end we offer up our decree. Blessed ones, if you will, please remain standing for just a few moments as we introduce to you a new fiat of the Ascended Masters to be added to the lexicon of Ascended Master students across the world. It is none other than the name of our seminar and of this very first module. It is Ecce Deus. This is not just a proper name for a seminar. This is a God command that is issued by the hierarchy of light, and most especially by those great Manus of the root races. It is issued to the sleeping, slumbering, anesthetized consciousness of the millions of life waves around the world, that it is time for them to awaken, to rub the sleep out of their eyes, to gaze into the clear ethers, and to see the vision of their own electronic body, of the blueprint of their own divine individuality, to behold that vision, to understand that this is for each of them the divine man-child. Beloved Kuthumi, when he was initiating the work of the Theosophical era, made the statement that ideas rule the world. He went on to say that new ideas were going to rumble like a clap of thunder around the world, and especially through the mental plane of the planetary body, and that these new ideas were going to cause a revolution in thought, in outlook as to what constitutes reality, and a revolution in the civilizations themselves. This fiat, Ecce Deus, is one such God command to the entire race, and you are invited to stand, as you are now doing, in the office of your own I Am presence and deliver this fiat with the ascended masters, who are constantly at inner levels giving this God command for the infant sleeping races of the planet to, at long last, awaken to the truth of their God identity. So if you will, please, put your left hand across your heart, raise your right hand, and give this command into the thought and feeling world of the entire planetary body with every bit of the enthusiasm of your heart that you can. Together. Ecce Deus! Ecce Deus! Ecce Deus! Now already, with the speed of light, that decree, as a command, has gone forth round the world with the clap of thunder and the rumblings thereafter, and as a seed of light, as a seed of truth, is beginning to work its way through to the outer consciousness of the mankind of earth. Won't you please be seated? There is a great, powerful key to your victory, which the Ascended Masters would impart to you today. For you to absorb the full momentum of that key does require your full attention. We are going to examine the nature of an ascended being in a few minutes. I can tell you from my own personal experience that it is a fearful and awesome experience to stand before many of these august, statuesque presences of the Ascended Masters, to see them in all of their magnificence and glory. Truly, you want to say, as the prophet did in the Old Testament, of these great ones, what hath God wrought? What magnificence is there? This magnificence appears to be such a pinnacle of attainment as to be so overwhelming and to be almost, as it were, unreachable. It is as if there was the proverbial impassable gulf that existed between Abraham and the sinner in hell who wanted a drink of water, but there was this void between them that God told Abraham was impossible to transcend. For all of that magnificence and wonder which these ascended beings are, as you stand in silent awe and admiration, realizing, of course, that there is not the slightest twinge of pride or ego awareness within them, nevertheless, there is a tendency almost to feel a gnawing sense of how in all eternity could one ever aspire to such greatness. I do recall an occasion when the mighty Helios gave a dictation many years ago, and he talked about 1,000,000 years of unfoldment and expansion of one's own life stream. And he said to those who were in attendance, "Blessed ones, 1,000,000 years from now, you would not even care to shake your own hand as you are today." Do you sometimes feel as if you're being called upon to do the impossible? That you're somehow or another supposed to sit down and transform yourself from the little ugly duckling into the wonderful, mature, divine swan gliding so majestically across the still waters? Well, that is the whole crux of the message of the Ascended Masters to you today, that this work which you are about is the great work of the ages. And you need not despair, because this work is the work of the great I Am. It is something that was envisioned by the God I Am that I Am, the allness of the Godhead, so very long ago in eternity, that we simply have a symbolical term, which El Morya has given us for that moment when this was first envisioned for you. We simply call it "in the beginning." But you should understand that from this very moment of eternity, the blueprint of each one of you as an ascended being has been perfected and existing in the mind of God as a jewel of a fiery engram of perfection. The very fact of the long, extensive drama of the life upon this world since the fall of man so many millions of years ago, the very fact that life has gone on, that the great sacrifice of Sanakumar and so many others has gone on, that the life waves of the pilgrims of the great mighty I Am presences have continued to strive and to strive and to strive, that they have not folded up their tents, turned their back away from this world, and simply disappeared into the ambient atmosphere of nirvana. The fact that they have not done so, but instead have continued, sometimes for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years, to descend over and over again into embodiment, is because the eye of God, the mind of God, has been upon this vision of the ascended being that was to be. So you are not alone in this quest. The only reason it has ever seemed to be so is because the great law has bowed to every conscious or ignorant expression of free will on the part of the outer self. And so long as that outer self chose to live upon the chaff of life, just so long the God presence would have to wait and abide, as did the Ascended Masters. But once you are awakened, once there has been deposited into your hearts the hope, the faith, the hunger of love to be reunited with the allness of that mighty I Am presence, and your free will is now engaged in affirmation of that blueprint, all the rules, as it were, change. And the entire vast mechanism of the hierarchy of light, all the way back to the central sun, swings into operation as the wheels of the gods, grinding perhaps to our outer impatience exceedingly slow, but trust me, grinding exceedingly fine, and hammering out through the strenuousness and the adversities of life's experiences, the burnished gold, the character that is the expression of the divine. Last night, the question was posed about what to say to those who are enamored with the whole variety of fascinating, glittering, entrancing baubles of phenomenon, of the little tricks and demonstrations that may occur within the psychic and the astral plane, and how it is that people, so many, seem to have come to put such value on those things. And after the evening was over, I was reminded of the experience of the early Europeans when they first came to the New World, up and down the north and south of America. The experience was much the same, that those who came with little colored feathers, with little brass bells, trinkets, necklaces of worthless beads, were able to exchange those baubles for pure ornaments of gold or silver. Indeed, the story is told about how certain Dutch traders, I suppose, if you're to believe the tradition, had roughly $28 worth of necklaces that they exchanged with the tribes on Manhattan Island in exchange for all the territory that is now Manhattan. And this is not an inadequate metaphor for those who would trade the pure burnished gold of the true divine identity to be found within the God Self in exchange for brass and lead and little silvered pieces of glass, which is all of that ephemeral, silvery, tinkly demonstration on the astral plane, all of that New Age phenomenon amounts to. And yet people are entranced and enamored by those things, dangling them about their necks, wearing them as apparel, just as those original Native Americans were deceived into exchanging something of true value for something that only appeared to have value, but in fact had none. So you are now in the position where there is the opportunity for you at long, long last to choose the better part, to choose your God presence, to recognize that it is the genuine article, it is the pearl of inestimable value. It is worth every ounce of effort, every breath you take. It is worth expending the last exertion of which you are capable to breast the finish line and win the victory of your own overcoming. As you go along this path, inevitably, there are many, many challenges and adversities that we all face. The Ascended Masters would have you know of their heart's inclination towards you in this regard. And so I'd like to share a little bit of that with you. One of the things that we at the Heart Center and in our ecclesia, or our community in Tucson, are constantly working on is the teaching of all who are there of what it means to dismantle the rhinoceros hide of self-preservation mechanisms that human beings of necessity have built up for themselves to insulate themselves from the harshness of the treatment that human beings tend to deliver to one another. There is the scorpion's sting. There is the bite of the asp. All of these poisonous things that we see in nature are only there because in previous eras, human beings would release such vituperation from their minds and their emotions. And in defense of that, there was a hedge that was raised around the heart. You remember the story of Sleeping Beauty and of how after she fell asleep, there was this thorn rose hedge that grew up all around the castle. It was protective hedgerow, the antithesis of the tube of light that was there as a human way of protection. This is not advisable by the Ascended Masters because when that is there, the heart is similarly manacled and unable to unfurl the three plumes of the threefold flame and to be the free, liberated, expansive heart of God, experiencing joy and giving love and receiving love in return. And so it is necessary for the disciple upon the path to set about dismantling that carefully crafted hedgerow of defenses which they have put up in substitution for the divine defenses over many, many lifetimes. Many individuals become very skillful at doing this, so much so that they succeed in not only protecting themselves, but also tricking themselves, deceiving themselves. It becomes so instinctive and such a second nature to them that it's done without conscious premeditation. As soon as there's something hurtful, they have their response. Well, the goal of the Ascended Master way of life is that when you enter our community, our fellowship with one another, you are to be welcomed as if you had just walked into Shananda's home in India, or Saint Germain's retreat of the Cave of Symbols, or Beloved Jesus and Mother Mary's retreat in Arabia, where obviously you would not have to worry about someone doing something of that nature. So slowly but surely, individuals trust. Individuals begin to believe and open up their hearts. But when that heart is open and those defenses have been dismantled, they are once again of necessity, and this is a double-edged sword, in order to really and truly suffuse love. One does have to be vulnerable to others. It's a two-way street. And so, ever more than ever before, it becomes imperative that we not send forth those stinging, biting, assailing arrows and slings of outrage against one another, because the heart flame has become so super sensitive as it opens up. This is as it should be. Why do I mention this? I tell you because from childhood on, it is the case that everyone is very, very sensitive to what is said about them, what others think of them, what condemnation is heaped upon them. They might be willing to agree with that condemnation and inflict it even more so upon themselves. This is not a state of affairs that allows for the Holy Christ self and the outer self to feel the native worth of the God presence, to feel that it has this inherited firstborn status as a divine being. And so many things in life create a buffeting. It's almost like you're blindfolded and led down the gauntlet where from unseen sides comes body blow after body blow. We know that this does occur as people go through life. And it is the very singular individual being who is so strong in their sense of divine selfhood that they do not permit those thoughts and opinions of others, accusations, where they're dragged by the scruff of the neck before the court of public opinion. It's very seldom that such an individual is immune to that pressure that is brought to bear. All of this goes on because we are obliged in this world to live at the bottom of a sea. It's not really dry land where we are. We're at sea level, and there is this whole astral plane and mental plane that goes for thousands of feet into the upper atmosphere. It creates a pressure that you feel in your emotional body, waking and sleeping. Likewise, the mental plane, the density of human thought and feeling is drawn by the gravity pull of the earth. And so you have this whole smog of human effluvia and human consciousness that the sons and daughters of God are obliged to live in. And out of all of this flung out there on your own, you're expected to be this carefree, blithe spirit of this son or daughter of God, aren't you? You're expected to be this illustrious master that is Lord of all that you survey. And yet, from every side comes the carping, comes the criticism, the stinging, anger, resentment, jealousy, gossip, all of those conditions. Of course, there's also another factor, and that is that humanly, very few of us measure up to the standard of perfection, which we feel is necessary of someone aspiring to the ascension. We make mistakes. We're not yet perfect. We may have weaknesses. We might grind our teeth and say with St. Paul, the good that I would, I do not, and the evil that I would not, that I do. He spoke about this thorn in his side that followed him throughout his life. So how, with all of this ideal state on the one hand, and what appears to be this other state on the other, how are we to win the victory? Mighty Victory gave a dictation one time, and he was going on and on about the great victory of God in heaven and how everything was so perfect. And then he posed a question to the group about, well, all of this being true, why is it that you don't have victories in your life? And he answered for the group and said, well, it isn't very easy, but we do manage to do it. We manage to find ways to be defeated. We manage to find ways to lose in spite of our best efforts. While this is the situation, the ascended masters would have you know that there isn't anyone who has ascended from this planet since the fall whose feet have not been bruised with the same rocky road, the same thorns along the path that each of us are obliged to walk. They too have been here and walked the same path, and they do understand. And they would have you know that the ascension is not a child's tin badge like that says sheriff on it. The ascension is not a little bauble, but those who ascend from this world, they have been through the crucible of life. They have endured the chastening of the law. They have felt themselves like a living piece of iron or steel, heated in the furnace, and then had the hammer and tongs pounding out the patterns of perfection through their identities, bringing their character and their identities, forging it in the forge of adversity and life, and at long last bringing it through as tempered steel that has been honed to an edge of perfection. And they would have you understand that this is the great work of the ages that you are engaged in. You are the supreme alchemist that is bringing forth the supreme alchemy. For the ascended master is the acme of all creation. The ascended being is the cornerstone of the pyramid of life and of all creation, more precious in the eyes of God than an entire galaxy of suns and nebula and stars and other matter. More precious than all of that is one ascended being, one divine God-realized self. And this great drama of life that we are engaged in is something that was envisioned not by you and I, but it was envisioned by the mind of God in the beginning. And that God presence conceived of the ascended master to be, the one who was to be, in all of that glory, and not only freshly ascended the first day or week, if you count that time in the ascended master's realm, not initially after that. That is not as high as you go. That is, as the masters have called it, the bottom of the top. Is that what it was? It was the very low rung, and you go from there, from glory into greater glory, because that vision has been held in the mind of God. So you do not need to despair about the work that you are engaged in as to your own mastery, because you are not alone. And it really doesn't matter what anybody else in this world thinks of you. Principalities, it doesn't matter what courts of law may say about you. It doesn't matter what your mother may say about you, or your father may say about you, although humanly you might be tempted. Beloved Kuthumi, when he was St. Francis of Assisi, had the experience of being the son of a wealthy merchant, and as he was inspired to donate to the poor, he would take the clothes and wealth that he had received from his family, and in particular his father, and he would end up giving it away until he had earned the scorn and anger of his father, so much so that when it was rumored that Francis was entering the town of Assisi, his earthly father would meet him at the edge of town with a cudgel, a physical cudgel, which is a stick, and a cudgel more biting of words. And he would follow his own flesh and blood son through the gates and through the streets of Assisi, cursing him and smiting him with this as he went for the choices that he had made, choosing God over the life of wealth and pleasure that his father had envisioned for him. So on this one occasion, when Kuthumi had obligation to go into town, he bargained with a beggar who was at the edge of town. And he exchanged the fine raiment that was his in exchange for a covenant with the beggar, that every time that his father would curse him, the beggar would make the sign of the cross and undo the curse of the father. So this you must understand about the work that you are engaged in. Do not give power to the appearance of the transformation that is going on in your life. Do not concern yourself overly that you are not yet perfect today, that you are not yet ascended, that you don't have this ability or that ability, that you seem to make mistakes, that you seem to still have weaknesses or what have you. Instead, understand that there is a company of ascended masters who are standing a tiptoe this day with a keen willingness and desire to fly to your side whenever you are so beset by adversities or temptation, and to draw you aside and say, "Come, let us reason together. Let us sit down and counsel. Tell me your story. What is it that is burdening you today? Let me carry that burden as much as I can. And most especially of all, be sure that you understand that I, the ascended master, such as Blessed Mary, look beyond the appearance in temporal terms of where you are now. And I understand the great groaning and travail of your spirit as you seek to transcend mortality forever and to rise out of that mortality into the fullness of your divinity. I understand that from time to time, like my son Jesus, you might feel that you yourself are at Gethsemane's rock and you are praying to your presence, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. And you yourself may feel as if you sweat great drops of blood. You see how the ascension is won? It isn't a little bed of roses in that sense, where there is not sometimes adversity and toughness along the trail. We talked, Carol and I, a few weeks ago about the gentleness of beloved Kuthumi, of how he's always has the reputation of being such a kind and gentle, pacific master. And at the same time, we observed the ruggedness of that master, the toughness underneath of his metal, and of how he had the fearlessness, the courageousness, an amazing strength to endure amazing hardship through any number of embodiments. I believe the story of him as Francis of Assisi, walking by himself without purse or script from Europe down to where the Crusades were taking place and out across the hot, dusty sands to meet the supposed enemy of the Christian camp with nothing more than the love within his heart. That is the kind of metal that was within this great master, so known for his peace and tranquility. So do understand that the ascended masters themselves truly, truly do have the capacity, drawing on their own experience, to know what you are going through, to look beyond it, and to help you birth your own divinity. You might as well have the sense that we're all women, we're all expectant mothers, and we're going to go out into the bush and give birth by ourselves. That's what you're doing in the great travail of giving birth to the God self within you. When that travail finds its conclusion, you will pass through. You will endure. What is not necessary in any sense along the way. It's one thing what the world may do. It's one thing the kind of adversities that may come. But there's something that you no longer need to do from this day forward. When someone hands you a crown of thorns, you no longer need to say, "Oh, thank you. Let me press it into my brow." You no longer have to be a co-conspirator with the world to inflict a crucifixion on your own divinity. You can instead commune with the diamond heart of your mother, who loves you with a greater love than any earthly mother could ever love you. Why? Because this mother not only sees that precious little lamb, an embodiment, but this mother also sees the illustrious divine man-child in the God presence, and sees the whole picture of how that God presence is working out its salvation through the flesh form. And that divine mother is possessed of the capacity to hold the full immaculate conception for you, each one, and to have that understanding of what it is that the Spirit is doing. Nowhere is this more perfectly illustrated than the entire life of our own beloved Jesus. He himself wasn't born with the proverbial silver spoon in his mouth. He wasn't immediately surfeited off to one of the physical retreats where he grew up in the balmy inner retreats of the ascended masters, the physical retreats, and took his ascension on the inner. He was born in a rude, crude stable for donkeys and asses and other beasts of burden. He lived his life where there was death on every street corner, where there were Romans in their armor clanking by, where they took the sword to the little children of his own hometown of Bethlehem and sought his life from his birth, so that he had to flee in exile, flee for his life. So he was not born into some wonderful, wonderful world, except in those occasions when he drew down the sacred fire. He had a physical body, just like yours. And there was not some kind of a distinguishing mark that the carnal mind would automatically recognize. That is why they needed Judas to identify him, because no one else could have known him. They would not have recognized and picked him out of a crowd, because somehow or another he was just standing there like some glowing divinity. He had a flesh form and these other bodies, but he had this inner self as well. He knew what his divine plan was, and he did have those advocates, especially in the person of his mother. I've spoken of this before, but it bears repeating today. Before taking embodiment, beloved Mother Mary was shown a vision of Jesus as the ascended master that he would become. That same vision exists for everyone in this room of the ascended being that they are to become, that they can become, that you can become in this lifetime. And that vision was charged through her world prior to taking embodiment. She met and consulted with Gabriel, and they covenanted together that when it was time for her to begin her mission, Gabriel, would appear to her, and he would flash through her consciousness that blueprint of Jesus as the ascended master. And only after she had that in her waking consciousness in the body as Mary did the Immaculate Conception take place. And from that moment, she held in her mind, in her third eye and in the diamond heart, this vision of his perfection. Held it for the little infant in her arms. Can you imagine the pathos of such a mother holding that child, knowing what could be? But I tell you, it was not a foregone conclusion. There was no gilt-edged charter that said Jesus Christ is hereby guaranteed the resurrection and the ascension automatically with some stamp on it. It could be won. It was there for the winning, but it had to be won, and it could be lost. So can you imagine having to hold that vision and keep the faith that it would come to pass? Keep the faith that it would come to pass. We cannot overestimate the value of the focus of Mary's consciousness and her mind, and the steady pressure of her mind's thought on that image of his perfection. Of course, he also had our own beloved Saint Germain as the champion and guardian, who also was fully capable of having that stream of consciousness in his world as well and knowing that perfection. You are in the exact same position in this life as that young lad of 10 or 12 or 14, beloved Jesus. You are in that same position. And for each and every one of you, there is that vision of the ascended presence of your being. Imagine how long the mind of God has been holding that vision of your perfection and of your attainment in the ascension. How long has it been going on? One of the reasons why we have observed the stepping up of the action of the Great Manus of the root race is because it is their service to life to hold that vision. They are like a great mother hen, a great shepherding, brooding presence that holds in their divine mind and uses the power of thought to hold the vision of the individual blueprint of perfection of every presence unascended and of what that presence is to become. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the stream of God consciousness that you are able to enter into rather than the stinging, biting, carping, gossiping, carnal mind, either your own or anyone else's in the world. You are able to attune yourself with the will of God and the mind of God, which this very moment in eternity is conceiving of your perfection. Oh, for the first time when you encounter and you enter into the stream of God's thought of your individuality, which is an ongoing act of cognition and will on the part of the Godhead. It is known in the East as the Vajrasattva, the diamond mind. This is what is meant by the diamond shining mind of God. The diamond is adamantine. The facets of that mind are razor sharp. They are mathematically precise, and they hold within their geometry the programming of each individuality. And this divine mind will not be dissuaded. It has not been dissuaded where you are concerned for millions of years. For millions of years, with all of the shenanigans down here, the mind of God has steadfastly held to what it knew was the truth of being. And so we, each one, can slough off what the carnal mind, individually or collectively, says about who we are, and we can instead avail ourselves of this divine mind and enter into the stream of that divine thought about ourselves, and finally come to the point where we reluctantly or otherwise admit, well, if after all the eternal Godhead and all of the ascended hosts deem to think this about me, it's about time I think it about myself. I will agree with this pattern of the flowing thought of the divine mind, and I will ratify that will of the first ray about the truth of being, and we shall conspire together, the ascended masters and I, and we will put me on a program. We'll train me. You know, all those personal trainers that promise to give you the perfect body in 3 months, pump up your muscles, get rid of that extra inches around the waist or what have you. We've probably seen it done a few times, and you figure, okay, if you put yourself in the regimen, maybe it could happen to you. Put yourself under the training of these ascended masters and of these great Manus of the root races who do know precisely what they're speaking of. They know just how to win your victory. Saint Germain made 2 statements side by side, which are very telling. The first is that he never trusts human nature. He doesn't count on human nature. Master Moria made a similar statement. It is not our custom to expect too much. So as long as the human nature is going on, the ascended masters abide in the peace of the Himalayan mountains. But when they see the light of the Christ beginning to shine forth, and they find an individual who will take them at their word and who will embrace their disciplines and the path that they have outlined and is capable of obedience, the flip side is that Saint Germain has also said, for that individual who is strong enough to give obedience to the few simple things that we ask, he can tell with mathematical precision the time, the when, and the where that their victory will occur. That is how precise the law is. And it is for each of you to decide when you've had enough of this world and this life, and you are ready to swing into alignment with that which the mind of God has been tenaciously holding for you as the hound of heaven for millions of years and earthly embodiments, or however long or short it might have been in each individual's case. There in your mighty I Am presence, you have that God self that has known the end from the beginning. Your Holy Christ self is a living, breathing embodiment of the thought of God about you. Your mighty I Am presence will not soil its consciousness with any thought about you that is less than your Holy Christ self. That is the truth of the being that your God presence doggedly, insistently, willfully, mindfully continues to hold and hold and hold. And if it didn't hold that thought, the Christ self would simply no longer be at that level. But your God presence knows it as such and will not lower its gaze to hold any lesser image of you than that Christ self. You likewise are able to accept that thought and put it on just like you would slip into a suit of clothes. Wear the thought of God about you as a garment of identity, and you will find out that clothes do indeed make the man. And maybe blondes do have more fun. The thought of God can be worn in that regard, and you will find that it is a very familiar and quite comfortable garment. There is a piece of music that you will hear very shortly. Many times, my heart is heavy as I try to translate into words truths that I know so very well, where words are such a paltry cup to try to use. And I am sometimes most grateful for the language of music, because in the strains of the music, I hear spoken eloquently the words, the soundless sounds that are so challenging to condense into cups of words. So it is with this melody and this strain of music. In this music, you will hear the macrocosm and the resounding of the mind of God. And you will hear the mind of God like a great smithy at a forge. And this mind is hammering out the blueprint of identity through the crucible of life and molding and shaping the pliable substance of identity to have it conform to this divine design. And what is that when it is through? It is that vision of the ascended master. So do understand that you have co-conspirators, you have ascended masters who are standing at the ready night and day to descend, as they have been described since the days of mythology long, long ago, and to in every way assist your God presence in striking off the shackles of outer expression and beginning to wear this divine selfhood of identity. I had a reading of beloved Saint Germain where he describes many of the attributes of an ascended being. I don't wish to take the time any longer to cover that material with you. It is there for you to study and meditate upon in unveiled mysteries. But simply do understand that each ascended master is a focus of the infinite, all-encompassing one, the great Brahman. They are one with the fullness of that divine mind, and there is an eternality and a vastness to their identity that belies what we only observe in the immediate form of that master. So that is the great creation, the greatest of all creations that is going on throughout eternity. And I know that you will pronounce, along with Moses, who wrote the 5 books of the Bible, when God beheld the creation that he had made and said, "Behold, it is very good." And that self-creation is the very good identity. No one can make God. No one can manufacture ascended masters in an assembly line process. They can't be stamped out like gingerbread men in a bakery. This is how ascended masters are forged, by making choices moment by moment, day after day, knowing themselves, drawing it forth. That is how they are made. So don't decry or worry too much about the rough and tumble adversities of life on this planet. 'Twill but teach the God to feel his victories the more. May I close with the blessing and the benediction of the great divine director. Please rise. Children of the diamond heart, I enfold you in the golden flame of my love. I protect you by the armor of my power. I raise you by the hand of your own divinity. I bless you with the fullness of my light. I give you the scepter of your own dominion. I seal you in the eternal freedom of your ascension, in that ecstasy supreme, the presence of the diamond heart. I am. Ecce Deus! Ecce Deus! Ecce Deus!